discussion is passion, purpose and profit. So what we will try to do is link the three elements during our panel discussion, probably draw some similarities or maybe the similarities if any. Let me introduce you to our panelists. I welcome you, ma'am, Ms. Annie Matthew. She serves as the Director, Alliances and Business Development at BlackBerry. She has contributed extensively to building the BlackBerry ecosystem in India as well as in Asia Pacific region. She has over 20 years of experience in wireless, IT and manufacturing industries across corporate strategy, partnerships and business excellence functions. Thanks, ma'am, again for joining us. I welcome you, Mr. Mahesh Iyer. He serves as the Head of Inside Sales Asia Pacific region at Monster.com. He is a seasoned strategy, sales and delivery personnel with industry-wide experience in BFSI, telecom, internet and technology. Welcome you, sir. Mr. Neeraj Kumar, an alumnus of IIM Calcutta. He is currently the Vice President and Head of Employee Relationships of Wipro Limited. He brings with him more than 20 years of experience in the field of HR, operations and strategy in various industries like manufacturing, engineering, IT and ITES. We welcome you, sir. Our fourth panelist earlier was Mr. Sanjay K. He works in SAP India, but unfortunately he could not make it due to someone falling ill in the family. But how can I miss Mr. Krishna Kumar, sir? We are extremely grateful to you to have accepted our request at the last minute. In fact, we called him at 5 PM yesterday and he was gracious enough to accept our invitation. He is an IIMC alumnus from PGPEX Batch 1. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with him. He is an engineer by profession. He is currently a director at PwC India in management consulting services in Mumbai with core focus on pharma life sciences. Now I take great pleasure in introducing you to our moderator, Professor Anup Kumar Sinha. He is an associate professor of economics in our college. He is also a reader in the Center for Economic Studies. He has taught in the Department of Economics in the University of Southern California as well. His consultancy interests include tax reforms, comparative experiences of developing economies. He has worked for ITC Limited, closely their economic review and forecasts, internal trade taxes and regulations, trends in fiscal stress. The list is endless. His love for economics is beyond words. Sir, we request you to kindly take the session forward.
Everybody, it's a great pleasure to be here. I've been moderating PGPEX events, that is, for quite some time. I think this is the fourth occasion probably that I've been doing this. One small correction. I don't have any promotions left due, so my rank is professor and not associate professor. I gave that up about 22 years ago. So. But I think on the net people pick it up because it shows my previous work experiences. Anyway, it's a minor correction. The topic has already been announced and I just lay down the ground rules. There are 4 panelists. We'll give each of them and we'll go from left to right. That's how the Indian economy has moved. So, we will give each panelist about 10 minutes to make an initial presentation and then I will reserve the right to ask a few questions, probably clarifications to elaborate something or something that I thought was worthwhile discussing which they had not taken up, which I would like to put into the discussion, and then of course we'll have enough of time to have questions from the floor, and it's mainly the panelists' duty to try and field them. I'll chip in if I can, and then I'll wind it up, and if necessary, I'll just put in, depending on how it goes, 2 or 3 minutes of summarization. So that's the way the game's going to roll. And may I then just kick it off and ask Neeraj Kumar. The two leftists are my students, by the way. I taught the first year of PGPX and then I never taught. Neeraj, of course, I taught in the PGP program. So, Neeraj, please, if you could make your... And please try to keep to time for the initial presentation so that we have enough time for discussions and other questions and answers.
Sure. Okay, to move around and speak?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's your floor.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. 10 minutes is a fairly short time for an HR person. By and large, we love our voices, so it goes on and on. So, multiple strands in my speech, so to speak. One of the examples which always comes to our mind when we work for a company like Wipro, and almost all, 160,000 employees right now. When I joined, it was just about 90,000. Extremely proud of working for not only Wipro, for the values that it brings in, but also for the fact that we work for a chairman who stands for probably the highest philanthropy that you would know, and the highest set of values. Okay? And the way the passion shows in the reviews that he does, without doing micromanaging and so on, the way he runs the entire setup is an inspiration for many of us. He would be, what, 69 or thereabouts, and probably another couple of years before he hangs his boot and somebody else takes over. But till evening, yesterday, 7:30, we were with him and doing the reviews. Never oppressive, never in your face, so to speak, but extremely pointed and sharp, never offensive. Choice of words are different and so on. So the story is about the philanthropy he runs, and not many people would know as to how it goes. There are two streams that he runs. One is the Azim Premji Foundation, which is completely off Wipro. So much so that the guys have a different mail ID outside Wipro campus. All the assets and liabilities are completely different and so on. The interest gates are also different. So they're run by a CEO, two CEOs actually. And it works on only two areas. One, to improve the standard of education in the country. So we run an Azim Premji University, which provides courses which do research on the education methodology as to how to improve the course content, the curricula, and so on and so forth. So it's a structured, organized way of doing philanthropy. The other part which runs and which has a huge corpus, so much so that it's in a manner of speaking, it's an embarrassment of riches. They do not know how to spend it too quickly and so on. So that's the education part, and the focus is completely on the primary and the secondary education. So initially they participated with this state government colleges and so on and so forth, and now the focus is on opening model schools across the country. So that's where a lot of his time goes. The other part is Wipro Care, which is a Wipro run initiative. Yeah. Equal amount of time, equal amount of focus, run by the employees themselves. So that is one part of this personality which drives each Wipro person to give the best. Yeah. So that's where the inspiration of, and in Wipro every quarter or so you'll have people celebrating 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years and so on. Because there's some holiday which comes with the 5 years and 10 years celebration. So people look forward to it in one sense of the term. So that's one part of the thought that I thought I would share with you. But somebody who runs a business of $7.5 billion, brings a lot of passion, and to what purpose? Because most of the dividends, which used to be almost 700 to 1,000 crores, most of it goes to the foundation now. None of it goes to him. Yeah. He's frugal, his needs are few, and so on and so forth. And if you see the way he operates, see the way he drives business, it's extremely inspiring. Yeah. The other part, which is a personal thing, is as to how the passion can change a business and do a turnaround. So I have played multiple roles in the HR fold, and now my role is less of an HR and most of a cost leader for Wipro, as to how to cut costs, how to drive efficiency, and so on and so forth. So last year we had 2 or 3 product platforms that we took out, and these were very small for a company of $6.5 billion. If you leave the non-IT part aside, it's just about $10 million each. One is a healthcare platform. The second is a platform which does analytics for trade promotions. It's an acquisition based in a small city in Australia, which has a population of exactly 99 people. Yeah, it's just about 99 people. 60 of them are our employees, but then they travel. So these businesses were floundering for almost, one business for 12 years, one business for 6 years, and so on. After the acquisition, it had not delivered any value. So we were worried, probably we need to sell it off, but if you want to sell it off, nobody is prepared to buy it. The enterprise value is much, much less than what we acquired it for. Plus we have sunk so much money. So we are given a 2 years period to turn it around. Okay. So we had a large strategy session of multiple strands with leaders, employees, levels across, and so on. A couple of things that we figured out from those conversations is that people want empowerment and people want freedom. They have been a part of a very large setup and they have not seen that these things have been given enough focus for them. So here's what we did. We removed some of those processes for them and started running them completely in the startup mode. Yeah. We said there will be no appraisals at the end of the year. We will not have the dreaded bell curve, which we love to drive as HR people. Yeah. We will not have the annual cycles of bonuses, merit hikes, promotions, and so on. You have a budget as a leader. You decide what works best for you. You want to promote everybody every month? Good luck. But then probably after 6 months, all your budget will be gone. There will be nothing as a bonus or a hike to be given to anybody. So you plan your year. There is no HR validation, nothing. Do it yourself. Figure what the best way is for you and your people. You want to promote them, you want to give them bonuses, you want to hire people, to retain people, you want to engage with them in multiple ways. This is the money with you. We will not do appraisal. At the end of the year, you have to decide who has worked, who has not worked. If you have to let people go, your call. Yeah. HR is not going to drive any of it, excepting some very few ground rules across. Yeah. 15 months, one business has completely turned around, made losses for the entire journey that it has been with Wipro. It was acquired some 12 years back. And one business in the cusp, it will take probably around 6 months. The passion that we brought about, I think, was phenomenal. Yeah. Because people felt empowered. They thought that they will decide the destiny of their people and inter alia of their own teams and so on. And we saw the results. So one business is doing well, so much so that maybe a couple of years time we will, now people are prepared to buy right now, but we are not interested in selling it. We want to keep it as a separate business, incubate it. And based on these principles, we want to incubate a few businesses more. For example, digital is one area that we are looking at actively and so on. So that experiment, that kind of hotbed of activity that we started with this, where we realized that passion, if driven in a manner which really is driven by the people themselves, based on their choices, works really, really well. And it has done wonders for this team. And maybe over a period of time, more and more team will come into this. Yeah. So those are 2 things that I wanted to share with people as an example, where we were able to experiment, we were given the freedom, we were able to experiment, and we yielded results. The end result was that if there is a passion about something, turning this around, if there is enough empowerment, and you set the ground rules and leave it to them and treat them as managers and not really employees of the company, works very well for us. It doesn't come wrong with me.
Thank you very much, Neeraj. I think it is important. I was wondering, that how passion, you can think of, the starting point of being passionate about something, an idea, a purpose, but it could be dwelling within an individual, could be within a team, and ultimately you require it in a bigger team, which we normally call an organization or a firm. And how does one actually transmit or translate that? Does it always start with a leader, or a leader comes out of a team or an organization who drives that passion? Here was an example of a very successful individual as well as a very successful team of people who work with him. of how a very specific case, how it can percolate, but there was a mechanism of that percolation that I think Neeraj was emphasizing. It was empowerment, giving them the space to understand what the passion was to be about, but then giving them the space to appreciate it and absorb it, rather than talking them on the head and saying, "Chalo, let's do it together." Right? But thank you, Neeraj. We'll come back to these issues, I'm sure. Can I now request Krishna Kumar Shankar Narayan, please make his presentation.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor Sinha, and to the PDPX Labs team for this opportunity. So you mentioned that you were the first. We were the first and last batch of PDPX students that you taught. I earnestly hope that it was not our experience which prevented you from teaching. But we were good students. So, Neeraj has spoken quickly about passion. So, I thought I'd spend some time on the remaining two P's, purpose and profits. So as you know, I work in the health industry space for PwC, and our clients are hospitals, healthcare providers, diagnostic centers, pharmaceutical companies, and so on. So conventionally, the way we have been measuring success for ourselves in PwC has been on revenue growth, has been on employee utilization, has been on what we call as engagement margin, which is same as profit, and how and the kind of clients that we've been working with, right? But as of last year, we've had a new leader for our global healthcare team, and so our new healthcare leader, Patrick Figgis, he represents the UK's healthcare practice. And when he was on a visit to India, he met with us, and the first question he asked us is, what is your sense of purpose? So sense of purpose, and his question, second question was, how do you measure success for yourselves as individuals and as a practice? And then, of course, we gave our normal measures, etc. We also said, which is quite untrue, that we measure success by how our clients benefit from our work. Honestly speaking, we don't do that, but we say that. But he said that there should be a fresh perspective. How does the work that we do as a firm, how does it impact society? Right? What is the impact on society for the work that we do? And is it improving the healthcare outcomes of the country? Is it improving access to healthcare? Is it improving reducing the disease burden? What is it that we are achieving in terms of our work on the impact of society? And that gave us an entirely new way of looking at our own role in the overall healthcare ecosystem, so to say. Right? Clients come to us with a particular problem. We deal with both public sector as well as private sector clients. So when we go to a public sector client, the success outcomes are more or less clear. But even with a private sector client, how do we, because they are integral to the healthcare delivery apparatus in India, that we should aim to measure ourselves by looking at the impact that our work has on society. We also have, in the last 1 year, it's to be able to walk the talk and not just be a nice conversation, first-time conversation between the head and his team. We also have started now to have instances or examples of the work that we do in different parts of the world on healthcare and the impact that it has in society being reported within the network. Individuals who have been working in such areas being recognized within the network. And this, of course, has had a profound impact on the way we look at ourselves and our roles within society. As many of you are aware, healthcare in India is a sea of inequities. Right? It's got urban-rural divides. It's got male-female divides. It's got caste divides. It's got rich and poor divides. Every possible inequity that you could think of is there in healthcare. So today and therefore the healthcare was largely available only to those who could afford it. But over the last 10 years, right, there has been an attempt to change that. Initially it was done through non-governmental organizations. Right? Non-governmental organizations who work in specific areas, underprivileged areas, tribal areas, etc., and provided healthcare to a small subsegment of the population. The problem was that it was successful in that local environment, but it could not be scaled up, and therefore it remained a local environment. Right. But over the last 7-8 years, in the area of healthcare, we've seen the development of scalable models of low-cost and high-quality healthcare. Right? That paradox or that link between cost of healthcare and the quality of healthcare has been, entrepreneurs are trying to break that link. There are a few examples of successful ventures. There's the Vatsalya Healthcare Group in the south. There is Global Hospitals here, and a few others across the country which are attempting to not just provide high quality healthcare, but also in a form and at a cost point that makes it accessible to a large number of people. And therefore, they are not just doing good for society, but they are also doing well for themselves while doing good. And I think that transition has been helped to a large extent by efforts from the government. The efforts of the government in trying to create health insurance schemes. Different state governments across the country have had efforts to enhance the health insurance schemes for the individual populations. And these health insurance schemes offer micro-insurance coverage. They offer 30,000 rupees coverage broadly, and then in certain states they go on to offer about 2.5 lakhs worth of coverage. But the idea is that with the growth in healthcare, the social entrepreneurs in healthcare, the availability of funding from the government, it's created, Times of India used this phrase called Udupis of healthcare. Right? As many of you are in Bombay and South India know, Udupi restaurant is a place where you get high quality food at relatively low prices. So there's been this trend for many Udupis of healthcare who tried to transform the entire healthcare. I would say transform. That's a word which, as consultants, we love to use, but it's not transformational yet. It's kind of early stages yet. But that's something which is definitely happening in the works. So the point that I'd like to close with is that passion driven by a sense of purpose and an environment in which you can translate that into profits, right? Because otherwise it remains a hobby. It remains a nice thing to do, and therefore that link is also kind of important. So I close with this, and
I think you brought out the importance of purpose and the impact the activity has on society as a whole. And without that being well understood, I don't think a purpose can be scaled up or it can be sustained over a period of time. So that's the basic importance of having the purpose that is socially worthwhile. I'll now request, you're going to use this, I'll move away, Ms. Annie Matthew to make her presentation for 10 minutes. If you are using the collar mic, okay, you are using the hand mic, fine. Just try to avoid being in parallel with the speakers. I have learned that empirically by trying to teach here.
So I was playing with this topic of passion, purpose and profit over the weekend, and I found it complex. And I thought let's have some fun while doing it, so I put up 3 slides, not more than that. And since everybody is speaking, I was wondering whether I should throw up the slides, and then I thought, anyway, I worked on it, so I might as well share it with you. So basically, it is so complex. In the morning we heard from them, and there are so many ways you can cut this, right? Passion, purpose, and profit. So I started with the whole thought of, do you really need passion? And for business, for profit. So just looking at what's needed for business profit, what's needed for business success. Is this logic or is it emotion? What do you think? Primary thing, logic or emotion? Emotion, because we are discussing passion. Yeah, right now we are very engaged, so emotion. But if you ask the business leaders who are making logical decisions, they would say logic. You can't be rational in business. You really need to have a logic behind what you're doing, what you're planning, so you're able to convey that to the employees and actually carry them along, right? But neuroscience says that 90% of the behavior that we do is irrational, or rather is coming from a submersive intelligence. It's coming from intuition, right? Then only 10% is actually planned out. But when you see PowerPoint presentations and when you see great people make these conversations of how did Bill Gates have that success and how did Mark Zuckerberg make this beautiful organization, they'll give you a set of rational reasons and, you know, I went from point A to point B to C to D and now I'm very successful. But actually you are backtracking success and you're trying to relate some of the steps which worked. There may be 10 which didn't work, there may be 2 which worked. But when you tell a story, you're telling the 2-3 things that really track to the success. So the point is, when leaders are deciding on courses, left or right, to buy or to make in-house and things like that, many a times it's driven by intuitive thinking, a lot which is submerged from their experience and all that. It's not entirely rational. You might listen to a bunch of guys present and you take a decision, right? And is that decision actually logically laid out? Many a times, no, it's coming from the leader's decision-making capability, relying on intuition and so on. So a lot of what we think is driving profit, is driving success, is actually coming from submersive intelligence or emotions. And hence emotions are very important. Emotions actually are driven by passions, create passions and drive further good results. So I'm looking at this from 3 lenses. One is the organizational lens. And I work with all these 3. I work with a large enterprise, a growth enterprise, which is BlackBerry. I work with a non-profit. I work with Startup Village, which is Kerala's endeavor to drive the startup ecosystem. Also work with the Innovation Society of Andhra Pradesh. So NIDE drives a lot of stuff around Innovation Society. It's no longer a small initiative, but the entire Andhra Pradesh has to be about innovation. I do work with a few startups, mentoring them on the board of 1 or 2 and stuff like that. So when I look at the organizations, passion, purpose and profit, all 3 matter in all these 3. But each of these lead with a different element. If you look at a startup, it leads with passion. You have to be really passionate about an idea to drive it. But you need profit to make that sustainable, right? All the ideas come and gone, and you're not able to sustain it. So you are a one-night star, or you are a big company today and tomorrow you're not there. So profit is still important there. You look at a growth enterprise, it's all about money, 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 right? So where we make the next bag, it's a monthly review, weekly review, quarterly review. You can get so bogged down in reviews that you might forget purpose and passion. It's all about profit. However, how do you sustain the profit? It comes back to passion, it comes back to purpose, right? It comes back to those few passionate employees who who walk that extra mile, like Sangeeta was saying in the morning. And you look at the non-profit, it's all about the purpose. Right? Why am I here? What am I contributing? The larger purpose, and hence you have all these non-profit organizations, social changes, all of that. But for them, again, to be sustainable, there needs to be a profit. So you cannot get away from all three of them. All three are interlinked, and they are all required in different measures at different stages of the organization. And in different measures as you go from top to bottom. So then I looked at us, employees within the organization. So if you look at this group of MBA students passing out of IIM, you're like these functional groups. If we take away your individual features, you're pretty much all going through the same courses, you have all the same knowledge, the same exposure, you're coming out like functional groups of excellence, right? Leaders of tomorrow. However, when you get into the organization, you go into the organization and one person goes into finance, and his passion is driven by everything finance. There's a return on investment. Right? The product guy comes with a great idea. He'll dive deeper and deeper into the profit, into the cost, into what markets, and so on and so on. The product guy, on the other hand, you can see it's a more complex set of things for the product guy who's trying to dive. He's very passionate about the details of the product, the functionality of the product, what is the MVP of the product. So that's what the product guy is driving at. And the sales guy is all about the customer, the market. Who's my customer? How can I be intimate with him? So you pass out from here, you get inside the organization, and there are different passions driving you. Right? And we heard in the morning, the finance guy typically is the stern guy, and I hope he will not be, but he's a guy who's only asking, show me the money. And the sales guy is about the product is not good, that's why sales is not happening. Or you add these features to the product and I'll get the sales happen. Or whatever, this conflict is ongoing. So how do you use passion to, or these differing passions, to actually drive success? Know this brand? No? Ladies, you should know this brand. Yeah? Burberry, right? Do you have a girlfriend or wife? Oh, cool. That's why he knows Burberry. Good. Good that you knew this. So Burberry 8 years back was on the trenches with this trench coat. They were known for the trench coat, but nobody was buying the trench coat. And what they did was actually, so how do you leverage the passions of different teams? They brought together a what if team. It's called what if, and it keeps meeting up. It's from the various functions within the company, bottom to top, all kinds of people. And they meet once a week, once a month, and talk about what if we do it this way? What if we use more technology? So only 8 years, they did more digital. You can see where they actually moved into those digital reviewers, critics, and all of that. And really today, Burberry, in fact, last year got the most digital IQ organization in the world, so in retail. Now, if you look at it with a personal lens, this is what happens after you pass out. And if you get into an organization, right, you collect your salary at the end of the month, again you collect your salary at the end of the month, and on it goes. But it's the passion that will actually make it more meaningful and more worthwhile. So what I want to drive here is break the patterns, right? Build more passions. So sometimes, and interestingly, within an organization, what you're passionate about may not be what your boss is looking for. So in BlackBerry, when I was leading I am still, but 2 years back we were very consumer focused. And we were all about building these applications and stuff from a consumer perspective. But I had this deep passion for healthcare. Now, earlier we were working with healthcare organization, I continued working with them, but I cannot report it to my boss. Right, so I was doing something which I cannot even report to my boss, because if I report it, he will say, focus, focus, focus. go get the biggest movies or games or whatever it is that you need. But I knew there was something great going on there. So I worked with the healthcare guys, didn't report it for a long time. What happened to BlackBerry? Moved from consumer to enterprise. Right? Refocused on enterprise. And boom, healthcare became a key vertical. All verticals, all industries became key. And suddenly, everybody is trying to go and meet up with healthcare organizations and get things going, but here I was. I said, here's a list of applications we have in healthcare, let's get going. So sometimes these passions, it's complex within an organization, right? You may have to do things that make sense to you, it will pay out in the longer run. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishnu. This is a new perspective in the sense that very often we tend to think about, when we have this juxtaposition of a sequence of words, that to think of it as linear, that there is a passion that drives you into having a purpose, you translate that passion into a purpose, and that purpose must be something that aligns with your business objectives, there must be some return, otherwise from a business perspective it's not worthwhile, it's not like a hobby of stamp collecting or something. But I think what Ms. Matthew did was she put in the fact that it can be broken up, you can structure it and combine it and recombine it in whichever way you like. It's more like a Picasso painting rather than a photograph of a still life, right? Or a sequence of sort of things you see in a particular movie, a sequence of frames that develop to a particular action. So that's a completely different sort of way that you can do in terms of your feelings, your purposes, your intellect, and how intellect and emotion also interrelate with one another, which sometimes we call emotional intelligence and all that. But thank you very much for a nice perspective. Now I request the last panelist, Mahesh Iyer, to please make his presentation.
When I walked in the morning, and I saw a lot of the senior bankers being so impromptu. They are not using any sheets of paper. So when I saw Harsha using a sheet of paper to read, Can you hear me? Yeah. So when Harsha used that piece of paper, I was very happy. I said, now I can copy Harsha Bhokle. Even if I use a sheet of paper, you guys will say, okay, it's prepared. So when you go for a movie, a serious movie you go and watch, like Saving Private Ryan or A Beautiful Mind, and during the interval suddenly Vico Vajraganti comes, right? Right? You have seen? So I'm going to be that. Because these are all serious guys. They talk real serious stuff. And I'm a sales guy. We talk a lot. So when he said HR talks a lot, I said, then where are we? That is the only thing we do, right? So how many of you are sales guys here? Only 2 people. So anybody have interacted with these guys? I'm sure all of you. Do they talk a lot? Yeah. So one, we do talk a lot. Second, we give a lot of gyan. So we come forward and we say, we know this, we know that. I've gone into the market, the product is this, the product is that. Let me tell you, it's all bullocks. We don't know anything. We don't know about the product. We know how to give gyan to a customer. So when I was growing up, and I used to play football and cricket, and so they used to tell me, you play good, but we want a captain. So I said, you can be a captain. So I asked them, any specific reason, what skill set you like? Do I bat well? Do I bowl well? No, you talk a lot. So you can give a lot of gyan to the people there. So you can motivate people and you can really brainwash people. So for a moment I looked at him, so you're saying in future I'm going to be a politician, right? So I'm going to brainwash people. He said no, but you're a sales guy and you look like a sales guy. You look like somebody who can sell, somebody who can talk. So over a period when I was, when I finished my graduation, and I realized that there's something which I really do well, is I can talk, which I've been doing for the last 5 minutes, right? So you've been hearing I can talk. So that's my passion. Then I realized over a period of time that that's not my passion. My passion is people. So somebody asked me a question during an interview, early days of my career. So what do you do well? I said, I engage with people really well. I talk to people really well. He says, those things are right. Can you sell something? So luckily that time I had a lot of hair. So when he asked me, can you sell this comb? So unfortunately the guy who was giving me the comb didn't have hair at that time. So it was very early part of my career. So I was able to sell him that comb. Don't ask me how, because it's going to be too much dirty secrets which I'm going to be revealing. So I will stay there. But yes, the passion to sell. Now, will that be enough for me to go and become a good sales guy? I don't think so. I need to engage with people really well. So people engagement is required. So when I walk into a customer, it's very important that I engage with him really well. Now, anybody of you from IT? A lot of you are from IT, right? So hardcore IT guys, right? Brainy guys, very, very hardcore. I mean, they'll only talk about Java, C++, and when you have a conversation, so whenever there are 3 IT guys standing, having a conversation, I go and stand there. So I'll be looking at their face one by one, and they'll be so intense. So once one of the incident happened, we had gone to a customer, and we were trying to sell something. And I told this guy, please remember, you talk only truth, don't talk anything else. So he looked at me and he said, yes, I talk only truth. So I said, but talk very less. I told him, talk very less. So he said, why are you asking me to talk very less? So we went during the meeting. He spoke very less. He spoke only about words, jargons, those technical jargons, which I never failed to understand. Then after 5 minutes, the conversation started with me. I had no clue what I was selling, but I went and sold. Because I know I should not boast about it, but when we don't know everything, we try to create a full big picture in front of them. It's the big picture which we are giving to the customer. Now, why we are giving a big picture to the customer? Because end of the day, the money, the revenue comes from there, correct? So, so this passion of selling did take me to a lot of places. I thought people engagement is good. Then I realized I need to engage. If I have to be a good sales guy, I need to be a good leader, a good trainer. So I started hiring people not based on their technicalities or the technical skill or the skill set which they can imbibe in them. I used to see the passion which they have for selling and to sell a product. I never ask questions during my interview. My interviews, when I take for my team, my interview is hardly anywhere between 5 to 7 minutes. It's not about what he has done in the last 5 to 7 years. For me, it's important that how much passionate he is to sell. So that passion is taking one step where somebody talked about excellence. So the passion will drive you to excellence, because when you have the passion to sell, you can actually sell it. That is the individual passion. Now, coming back to the topic of passion, purpose and profit, which was the crux. In my last organization, we had a very good concept in Polaris. We had a concept called Lakshya. So what is Lakshya? Lakshya means goal, right? So every 2 years, we used to have a goal or a session of all the senior leaders, 13,000 employees. So nearly almost 100, 150 top leaders will come. They will engage and they'll set a goal, post, a purpose, right? A purpose that within 3 years, I want to be here. I want to be a $5 billion company or $7 billion company. Now, that's a purpose. Now, is there a passion from the team to take the organization to that level? That's a question that's what the brainstorming session used to happen. It used to happen for 3 days. It used to discuss and decide where this organization is going to go. There is a passion, there is a purpose, and at the end of the day, how much bottom line money we have made. So, in life, passion is something which people talk in the corridor, right? I'm passionate about, doing something. So, one of the days in the earlier part, I used to say, I want to be a movie star. So the guy looked at me and said, you don't have hair, how can you be a movie star? How can you be a star? I said, I can still be a star. The passion is there. I want to do movies, I want to do something. So the passion has to be measured. How will you measure? Just by saying that, I want to be a movie star, can I be a movie star? No. Can I take the appropriate measures to take my passion to the next level? That is critical. So just having passion will not take you anywhere. You need to have those passions measured internally. You have to discuss internally. You have to think that within 3 years, where is it going to take me? Within 5 years, where is it going to take me? Do I have a long-term vision to take my passion to the next level? That is critical. So everybody has heard about Apple. I'll take another couple of minutes. Everybody has heard about Apple, right? So Apple has one, they have something called as, can anybody tell me, they have a punchline, or they call it, think different. How many of you have heard of it? Right? Think different. Think different is a concept which they derive internally, also externally. That's why Apple year on year has been able to bring out a product which nobody has even imagined. They are way ahead of time, right? So, how many of you know that iPad was the first product to be designed? How many of you know? But did iPad come first? No. iPhone came. Why? iPad, when they evaluated, they designed the product long time before even iPhone came into the picture. So the LED screen, or whatever you call that, the glass, the cost of that glass was so high that if they had to sell iPad at that time when they had designed and conceived, they would have to sell it at probably $4,000 or $5,000, and nobody would have bought, because you get a laptop for $1,000, right? So what did they do? They didn't sit. The entire design team sat and they shrunk the iPad into an iPhone. That's how the whole concept came of reducing the size of an iPad to an iPhone. So that's passion, the passion internal and the passion external. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much, Suresh. That brings us to the end of the first round. I'll just quickly raise a couple of issues which I thought I won't ask before. I'm not bold questioning in class, but I'll just leave it to the panelists. Anybody might want to comment. Mahesh gave us an example from being passionate, purposive, and he'll go beyond that in terms of team building, from the perspective of selling. And selling is an important part of translating your ideas, etc., into profitability. Without that function, nothing else will actually occur. So it's a very critical kind of issue. But if I look at the word passion, the way all of us have been talking about it so far, has been that it's very closely linked to the word commitment. That passion is something I'm attached to, I'm able to work for, I have a clear-cut idea about. When you look at the English language word or our everyday usage of the word outside a business school context, passion is a very strong emotion. Passion could be love, could be anger, could be irritation, hatred. In fact, many good things of life may come out of anger, irritation, hatred probably not, I don't think so. But there's a famous adage that a pearl is born out of irritation. And it is because an oyster is irritated, you get something which we all like, and it's beautiful, a pearl, and it can have a perfect shape and all that. So does any other thing other than, does things like love for something or irritation or necessity, mother of invention, right? So being innovative, is it this perception of being and then becoming attached to it? So it's like, I think Annie raised the question of emotion or logic, right? It's like a chicken and egg problem. Which came first? That somewhere when I'm at the stage of inception, when I'm looking at the idea that's being born, is it about a logical thing? Is it driven by passion? But then it could be irritation or a necessity. I have to find a solution. Or it could be that somewhere along the line I'm also parallelly, and that's where I think Annie is sort of breaking it up into a cubist painting. Makes sense. I'm also parallelly looking at, would it help people? Would it serve a social purpose? Or is it just some crazy thing in my mind which is not going to be useful or be accepted by anybody else? So where is this sort of, the other role of passion beyond just a thing about commitment and transmitting it? Those are important things, I'm not denying that. But is there any other sort of way where passion, even one could have a passion for profitability at all costs, so be a Colombian drug lord. Those guys know about profits, all right? And they kill for profits. And killing is also about passion. It's about hatred, anger, and the mafia kills for making more profits. We are not talking about that. So where is it? Are we drawing a circle around what we call passion as something to do with emotional intelligence, a social commitment, a bigger purpose, some built-in ethical judgment about the passion that I'm carrying? We control our passions. I may dislike you enormously. In a normal course of affairs, I'm not going to go out and murder you. Okay, but if there's no guarantee I'm going to like you, I'm going to love you. Right? I may indeed have a very strong dislike for you, but we control those passions. So where is that control? Where is the bigger picture? Just any quick comment. It's something that was bothering me at breakfast. I was trying to think of that where exactly what kind of passion, because we think of passion in so many different ways. Anybody wants to comment on?
So the point which you brought about is about commitment and passion. So one thought which crosses my mind very often is there could be situations and there are circumstances in personal and professional life where you may not be passionate about something all the time. I mean, you cannot be a high energy, passionate, driven, walking that extra mile kind of person. But there's a commitment. Commitment with a sense of purpose. Commitment because there's a livelihood. Commitment because that's how the society has designed you, or that's how the phenotype is. For example, there are personal things that you do. There are personal commitments that you make. You may not be passionate all the time, but there's a purpose around it. It may not be profit. It may be a recognition, a sense of duty. It could also drive the entire thing around this. And that also extends to professional life. There are things that you do because you are committed as a professional, because your livelihood comes out of it, because you owe something to your manager or to the organization. But over a period of time, it may translate into passion, or it may not at all. Yeah. So that's the point I thought I probably wanted to make based on what you just said.
Okay, so I just wanted to say that passion is that enhanced emotion born out of all of that. Love, hate, anger, all of that can create passions. The opposite, I would think, is apathy, where you're not feeling anything. As long as you're feeling something, so Swachh Bharat, we hate the dirtiness in the country, and hence was born a passion for cleanliness. So I think passion has the two sides to the same coin, which is a positive and negative. It can be either way. But if you don't feel anything at all about a topic or an issue, that's the problem.
Passion, basically what it does is animates your purpose and brings it to life, basically. It just pushes you to have a purpose, and bring whatever passion you have, whether it could be anything, it brings it to life. So, you know, it's a very integral part of every human being, and we, at some point of time, we, we regret, you know, there was a very good topic which I had read online some couple of years back. There was a guy who was suffering from cancer, and the doctor told him that you've got only, you know, probably 4 or 5 months to live, and you know, I don't know whether you will recover, what will happen. So this guy, from that day onwards, he thought every day is going to be death for me. I don't know whether I'm going to die today, tomorrow, whenever. So he imbibed the passion of traveling, you know, across the globe. So, you know, he gave this speech after a couple of years, you know, after this was detected, and you know, the doctors told him that you have cancer, but he recovered, and you know, the passion to live, you know, was there for him. I mean, you can, you know, correlate it to anything. So every day, if you think, you know, it's going to be the last day for you, if you don't complete your passion or whatever you had thought some ages back, 7, 8 years back, if you have not thought about it, start working on it and ensure that you start, you know, think that, you know, you should not regret after 10 years. That I wish, you know, how many of you have done that? Then after 5 years you say, I wish I could have done that, right? So it's only a wishful thinking, but are you enacting all those wishful thinking, whether you're taking that passion to the next level by actually doing it, you know, actually implementing it. Somebody has a passion to, you know, climb the Mount Everest. So you have been thinking. At some point of time, you have to go and do it, right? So you have to take the passion to the next level. What we do in our life is we usually compare passion with, you know, I have passion. So it has to translate into money or something materialistic. So we are keeping money as a metrics for us to compare ourselves, you know, whether my passion is translating into money. It's not that every time passion will translate into money. Sometimes passion is passion. You want to do something, you want to do a bungee jumping, go and do it. So don't wait for it. You know, if you have a passion, if you think that that is possible to achieve, please go for it, and you will definitely feel much better once you have done it.
No, I think certainly, you know, the examples from history also tell us that it's the emotion associated with certain situations which has brought about profound changes in society. I mean, the common example that everybody knows is when Mahatma Gandhi was pushed out of the train in racial South Africa. That was, even before he came to India, that became the spur for his struggle against colonialism and apartheid, etc. So I think across the world, and so much so in business situations as well, that oftentimes the trigger for solving you know, your sheer sense of frustration or unhappiness with the way you've been treated or the kind of you know, product that you've been given, etc., translates into a business idea and therefore becomes an opportunity for you to, you know, take it forward as well. So I think I completely agree that it's got, you know, it often becomes the basis for you know, collective action, which could be transformational in nature.
Thank you very much. I have one or two other points to raise, but I'll refrain from that in just about a little over 20 minutes. I would like to now open it to the floor. If you have any questions or comments, you want to elaborate, liberty to do that, only don't take too much time and sort of give other people a chance. And if you have questions to the panel and you know exactly whom you are asking the question to, please identify the panelist so that that person can respond. If you are unsure, just throw it open into the air and we'll see who can pick it up. Yeah.
My question is open question. I want to challenge that passion would lead to. So I would like to challenge that passion would always lead to profit. So not necessarily it would lead to profit. So what is the answer for that? Do we go with passion or do we go with the profit? But we have purpose definitely. We are going for a passion.
What gives you more satisfaction? A sense of accomplishment at the end of the day, or a sense of probably more dollars or rupee in the bank account? That would decide.
It's basically the, as I said, it's the metrics. You're having a metric to measure. So you need something like to measure. For example, you have a passion. Now, everybody cannot be such a Tendulkar that he has a passion. He worked really hard, talent is there. He really worked hard, and at the end of the day, he became successful. So there has to be metrics. So somebody measures a success by somebody has done really well. He has earned millions of dollars. Somebody measures success with, for example, boxers, Mary Kom. She didn't earn that much money, as they say. Even they say Priyanka Chopra earned more money enacting us than she ever earned in her life. So, but she had a passion for boxing. So she did that. So whatever she earned, she was never like, I don't think she has ever gone and measured that I wish I could have earned this much. But her passion is boxing. I will go ahead and box.
If you want your business to be sustainable, if you're talking about business and passion, then profit matters, right? I was trying to make that point earlier that otherwise it's a fly-by-night company. You're here today, you're very passionate about that, you did some service, not scalable, not sustainable because you don't have the money. And non-profits typically depend on grants and other things, but even that grants dry up. So at some point you need to start thinking about profit, but profit need not be a primary driver. It could be a passion. At a personal level, yeah, I can be passionate about dancing and dance and be happy. I don't need to worry about profit from that or anything, but just have fun doing the passion.
I think also at the individual level, you expand the concept of profit into something, in terms of a return. So it could be a personal satisfaction by dancing, or it could be a recognition that I've climbed Mount Everest, my peers are very happy, I overcame a challenge, it's there to be climbed a mountain, right? So you can look at it in a different sort of variety of ways. But I still think that there is an issue of ethics there. I can talk about passion which comes into a purpose, into monetary profit, let us say, or even a satisfaction of, say, killing somebody whom I hate, or killing for money, a terrific, wily murderer who starts with a strong hatred and then gradually sort of gets it into a purpose, schemes out the plan. Think about a good murder mystery book that you might have read, right? You can translate that into a business organization. The fly-by-nights, they may not be killing people, but they're basically duping a whole lot of people, fraud, telling lies, not withholding information, not being transparent. So somewhere along this line, I think there has to be a dose of ethics that to restrict the domain of what we are talking about. That social purpose, I think, that was talked about, somewhere that has to come up, float up on the surface when we are talking about all these things. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. That those negative things that I was saying might carry us into another kind of set of results that we don't want. Yeah.
My question is open to all in the panel. Is passion a fundamental human virtue that if you apply from one interest to another, the results, you get the satisfaction or you get the whatever result you want? Or is it something that is not detached from the interest? Had Sachin not been Sachin, had he played football? Or is it really because he played cricket? Is it on the dependent from the interest, or is it a fundamental human virtue? That's what I'm asking.
I think there is one more element to passion, purpose and profit. You have to be good at it, right? The talent. And it is a together, and that is where you actually start to see returns, profit, or whatever. So I mean, that's just my view to your.
It is probably to my mind it's a fundamental human virtue, but it may not apply in all the field that will work. Yeah. It's a source of energy, it's a source of drive, purpose, direction, but may not apply in everything that you do. You may be selective and so on.
So passion could be anything that challenges you. Motivates you to move towards that. It might be good, it might be bad, but at least you have that urge to do something. You might be a good football player, but you want to play cricket. That's not possible because there is some miss. You might play up to a certain level. After that, you might not reach the every goal. If you are saying that I have a passion, I want to play once, that's enough. That is okay. If that is the case, then it's a different ball game altogether. But passion is something which actually stimulates you. It really motivates you towards your goal, the end goal, or the final pedestal which we want to achieve. Anything like reaching heights, reaching success, getting fame, earning money. So end of the day, it stimulates you. So passion needs, also it challenges you. It's very important that a passion should challenge you. You cannot have, of course, in reality you can have passions of doing whatever. I watch MasterChef, so I want to be a cook. So is that my passion? I want to be a cook, but when I see those things online, when I see it on television, the way they are fighting, the way they are cooking, it stimulates me. Probably I should be part of a challenge. So that means anything which is a challenge, anything where there is a competition, maybe that stimulates me. So that would be my passion.
There is a certain degree of dependence we agree.
I may add in terms of what you asked, I think you talked about feelings, from feelings, emotions being something intrinsic, germane to human activity, human being. I agree with you. You can't have a person completely devoid of feelings. But emotion and passion that we are talking about is, you have a gamut of emotions, and from there you are looking at passion, where certain emotion or emotions are heightened or enhanced, as she's calling it. But then in those cases it may be, and there is a debate about this, linked to self-interest. That heightening of the passions, you love somebody, there is a self-interest that you want to be closer to that person, right? You hate somebody, you want to be far away from that person. You're angry, you want to get sort of revenge, so you're angered by something. So you can have self-preservation, self-interest, all those coming up. You may or may not have complete altruism, but altruism or concern for others in a selfless act is not an impossibility, I would say. Sometimes in economics and business we always reduce everything into rational, self-interested activity. But I think you can have something beyond that. In fact, I'll just quickly mention, in the economics literature which I'm familiar with, there's a lot of talk of ethics, etc. And people try to find out whether there was perfect, ideal altruism possible at all. Is there something completely selfless, an act yet which is common enough that we can relate to? All right. And there were papers written, and most people talked about blood donation, because you're donating blood, you're making a sacrifice in that sense, but you don't know who the recipient of that donation is going to be. You are giving it to an anonymous beneficiary, which very often we don't want to. Beneficiaries always want to know, donations, where the donor wants to know where the benefits are coming from. So I think self-interest is important, but it's not always associated with feelings.
So in the interest of time, we would like just the last question.
So I have this question for the panel. When we talk about passion, we have talked that it exists within an individual, right? So in an organization, like you get a lot of individuals, how do you induce passion? Can it be induced? Can it be created? That was the question.
So I gave you an example of earlier on Zappos, right? So the organization itself, the entire organization's feel and passion is to serve the customer. So their punchline is wow, right? They want to wow. They want to wow the customers. Now, people, when they hire anybody, of course they have a way to judge a person's, various quotients. So they have, there are 5 quotients which they look at. I only remember humble now, but there are some 5 quotients through which they identify whether the person is passionate enough to work with Zappos. So, of course, it can be used, but when you hire somebody, you identify that that person is the right fit for you. For example, for us in Monster, we are a sales organization, pure sales organization. We don't do anything else. We only sell. So when we hire, we don't look at the person has got what qualification. Basically, he needs to be a graduate, but we don't look at whether he has the technicalities to take care of it. That we will take care. Those technical things we will ensure that it comes. But the drive and passion to sell is something which we look at. So when we hire somebody, automatically we ensure that that is taken care of. Whether it is 100% possible, I don't think so. We are not living in a perfect world, right? So that's not possible. So there will be 90% who will still, who are very passionate about sales. The remaining 10% will still come to earn that money, to earn that extra bucks, and the moment they find another job, they might hop. So that's always a possibility. But you can't have 100%. But yes, there is a possibility that 70 to 80% you can drive that passion when you hire right.
Just adding to that, you asked whether can organizations have passion, and I must say that it is organizations must have passion, because when you go in as an employee and you have these great ideas, and you can end up saying that, okay, I had this great idea, the company didn't do it, so we didn't do well. But it's your responsibility to be passionate about that idea enough, create the right business case, and influence people. So when we work within organizations, influence is the biggest thing. And how do you get influence? How do you drive your vision and all that is built on influence, and the ability to influence to a large extent. You can be logical and drive it, but it takes it to yet another level with passion. So if an organization wants to go from good to great and great to excellent, passion is interesting.
In the name of passion, just one last question, bonus question.
Thank you. I have a question related to Mahesh. He was telling in his speech that trading sales. Okay, you told that trading sales product sales. Okay, you told that you probably need not know about the product details or say in detail to sell the product to the customer. Rather, you specified about the passion you should have and the human interaction. I do believe the human interaction is pretty much necessary. And for me, say for example, if I love a girl, if I am passionate about her, it's a completely separate thing. Okay, but regarding product sale, I believe both of them should go hand in hand. If I miss any part of your speech, I really feel sorry for that one, but no, that is my question. Do I require both of them hand in hand, or it can go passion or what trumps the product specification?
So when I said you don't need to know product knowledge, what happens is generally when a sales guy goes, 50 to 60% of the time he knows the product. He wants to go and sell the product. He has the passion to sell the product. But will only product knowledge help? I can be I can go walk up to a customer and I explain him just like a robot. Mrs. Talwar said that robots will be the future. So can robots sell a product? No, they cannot. You need a human angle. You need passion. So of course, product knowledge is critical. I said it on a lighter note. Yes, you need product knowledge, but yes, sometimes what happens is we as a sales guy, we go and overcome it. We exaggerate, right? Most of the sales guys. So since the crowd has got only 2 sales guys, so when a sales guy goes to a customer and tries to pitch his product, most of the time he either oversells the product or overcommits to a customer. So how many of you from delivery? somebody from delivery, service delivery, or somebody from, I go and commit that I'm going to give you Taj Mahal, right? And I go and tell delivery, see the Taj Mahal you have to build, you have to build it at 1 rupees. So you will look at me and you will say, you asked me to build Taj Mahal and you are giving me only 1 rupees. So that means what the sales guy has done is he has gone ahead and over-committed. So most of the time when lack of product knowledge is there, that's when you go and overcome it. So product knowledge is key for somebody to sell, but there are situations where without passion you cannot do anything. So everything goes hand in hand. Because as I said, it's not a real world where everything is 100%. So you need to balance yourself when you walk up to a customer and you really need to have the drive. So Prime Minister Modi is the biggest sales guy I've ever seen. I think so. When I was growing up in my sales role, I used to talk to customer only over a cup of a tea. So he does chai pe charcha, right? So as a sales guy, I feel much easier when I walk up to the customer and I say, let's go down, have a cup of tea, and we'll discuss. Usually on a one-to-one basis, it becomes very difficult to convince the customer. So that's possibilities also there. So the passion is there to sell. How I sell it, it's up to us.
Just one point, Mahesh. Robots have started selling. Amazon, 60 billion company.
Drone.
No, not drone. 60 billion company, entire sales is run by artificial intelligence and NLP.
So I'm sure we are going to be non-existing after some time.
Okay, I think I won't sum up. There was enough of floating questions. We are running out of time. I would like to close the session. Thanks to all the participants and the panelists for being patient. And there was a lot of food to think about, but I think you also need to get fuel for your stomachs. So, thanks time and thank you.